7 years ago, The Handmaid's Tale delivered one of television's most galvanic opening seasons, a suffocating red-cloaked descent into theocratic nightmare that felt, in the political moment of its release, less like dystopian fiction and more like a weather forecast. What followed was 5 more seasons of diminishing returns. June Osborne's story, stretched far past its natural breaking point, devolved into what critics eventually called torture porn, an endless cycle of suffering, escape, recapture, and suffering again. The Testaments arrives as both a sequel and a course correction. Agnes, who is about 16, appears to have an idyllic life. Her father, a top commander, seems kind enough, and her Marthas, Rosa, and Zilla provide the warmth and stability in her home. However, her icy stepmother, Paula, is an adversary rather than a nurturer. What viewers of The Handmaid's Tale know, and what Agnes does not, is that she is Hannah Bancole, the biological daughter of June Osborne and Luke Bancole. She was kidnapped as a child when Gilead seized power and placed with Commander Mackenzie and his first wife, Tabitha, who became a beloved surrogate mother before her death. Agnes's biological mother was a handmaid who escaped to Canada and is currently working for Mayday. Agnes has no idea that her real mother is the woman Gilead has labeled a terrorist. Agnes uses her palatial doll house and dolls made to resemble the residents of her life-sized home to act out matricidal fantasies, specifically against Paula, her cold stepmother who is scheming to marry Agnes off as quickly as possible, but her rebellious streak is genuinely rare. She is for the most part a true believer. She has been raised to be. She recites Gilead's doctrines with sincerity. She looks forward to marriage. She processes Gilead's violence as natural consequence rather than atrocity. The series follows young teens Agnes, dutiful and pious, and Daisy, a new arrival and convert from beyond Gilead's borders, as they navigate the gilded halls of Aunt Lydia's elite preparatory school for future wives, a place where obedience is instilled brutally and always with divine justification. Their bond becomes the catalyst that will upend their past, their present, and their future. June Osborne's story was told from the bottom of Gilead's female hierarchy, the handmaids, fertile women used as slaves and walking wombs by the state's ruling commanders, stripped of their names, their histories, and every legal right. The Testaments lives at the opposite end of that hierarchy. In the palatial homes of commanders' daughters, girls coddled in vast wings of their fathers' mansions and taught embroidery, flower arranging, and how to host the perfect tea party. The students are divided into the Plums, teenagers in deep purple uniforms who have not yet gotten their periods but are preparing for the marriage market, the younger Pinks, and the Greens who are fully flowered and entering an aggressive grooming cycle to be married off to a commander as soon as humanly possible. In Episode 1, the first genuinely shocking scene of the series involves a man dragged into the classroom on the charge of touching himself inappropriately on the school grounds. Aunt Estee leaves it up to the girls to decide whether he's punished. They all enthusiastically insist that he be severely punished, which involves his arm being sliced in half by a buzzsaw while he vomits and sobs through a gag. Daisy flees and vomits. Agnes is bewildered by her reaction. "He broke the rules," she says simply. The gulf between these two worldviews, laid bare in a single exchange, is the axis on which the entire series turns. Episode 3, focused entirely on Daisy's backstory, is possibly the best episode of the series so far. Daisy provides voiceover talking about how she studied Gilead in school when she was in Toronto and how, though it seemed like it happened overnight, there were signs. Candidates running for office had said things openly about women and gays before Gilead happened, but were still elected. The line lands as pointed contemporary commentary, and it's not subtle. But in context, Daisy narrating from inside the place those candidates built, it earns its weight. The episode also gives us the full shape of June's encounter with Daisy after her parents' murder. June appears early when she meets Daisy after Melanie and Neil's deaths. She knows how it feels to lose everything, and the two embrace. Moss, who is an executive producer of the series, had been notably cagey about her appearance in pre-air interviews. The cameo is brief but resonant. It is the passing of a torch, and both characters carry the weight of what that torch has cost everyone who has held it. Episode 4 signals a definite shift in tone, moving from setup to urgency. The structural engine of the episode is a tea party, the Greens hosting the aunts for a formal assessment that will determine their marital matches. But the real engine is something much darker. Agnes bites into her piece of party cake and crunches down on a small ceramic bride hidden inside. She chips her tooth. Becca's mother immediately offers her husband services to fix it. Becca's father is Dr. Grove, the school's dentist. At Dr. Grove's office, Becca's father sedates Agnes, then closes the door separating him and Agnes from Daisy in the waiting room. One of the last things Agnes sees before going under is the dentist removing his white coat. When she comes to, he's washing his hands and bidding her a good day. Agnes gets ready for bed that night and notices her underclothes have been retied incorrectly since being at the dentist's office. Agnes is ultimately put under for a procedure and wakes up questioning whether Becca's dad took advantage of her while she was passed out. Her suspicions are proven right when she notices her shirt is tied differently than she had originally done earlier that morning. Agnes says nothing. She confides in no one. Due to the structure of Gilead, young girls and women are led to believe that they are to blame if a man is inappropriate or takes advantage of them, because that means they were too tempting. The system that was supposed to protect her, the male authority structure, the religious framework, the entire moral architecture of Gilead, is precisely the system that enables what was done to her. She has no language for it that doesn't end with her being blamed. Both girls end their evenings in intense distress, and it's heartbreaking to witness. The episode's final minutes cross-cut between Agnes realizing what happened to her and Daisy losing her radio signal mid-warning. Two girls in two different kinds of danger, left completely alone with it. Meanwhile, the Mayday operative at the flower shop has begged Daisy to relay a message to Garth. She needs moving. She worries she's been discovered. Gilead is tightening its nets. The bodies hanging along the roads aren't abstract warnings anymore. The key revelation still ahead, confirmed by Atwood's source novel, is the moment Agnes learns her true identity. She finds out that her biological mother was a handmaid who escaped to Canada and is currently working for Mayday. She also realizes that her mother had another child who was smuggled to safety in Canada during infancy. She meets her half-sister at school, then agrees to go with her to Canada to transport documents containing information about the leaders of Gilead. The architecture of the series is designed to bring these two girls, Agnes and Daisy, June's biological daughter and her de facto chosen daughter, into collision with each other's truths. Agnes still believes in Gilead. Daisy is there to help dismantle it. The irony that they will ultimately work together toward the same goal, the exposure and destruction of the regime, while starting from entirely opposite places, is the story's great structural tension. After becoming depressed and anxious about marrying following her assault by Dr. Grove, and after threatening to harm themselves, Becca and Agnes beg to join the higher calling of the aunts rather than marry, a path that leads Agnes toward the moment she learns everything her life has actually been built on. Aunt Lydia this season is threading a needle so fine it should be impossible, maintaining enough credibility with Gilead's leadership to keep her position while quietly preparing the evidence that will eventually destroy it. The novel explains that Aunt Lydia was part of Mayday, having been forced to leave her career as a lawyer when the United States fell. Although The Handmaid's Tale originally portrays Aunt Lydia as a true believer in Gilead, she became disillusioned with it in later seasons. Whether the show will be able to reconcile her long years of genuine participation in Gilead's violence with a redemption arc remains one of the season's most contested open questions. The series is, at its most distilled, about the difference between ideology and reality, and what happens to a person when those two things finally meet each other head-on. Agnes grew up inside Gilead's promise. She has never known anything else. The horror of her story is not external oppression, but internal formation. She has been shaped from birth to find her captivity comfortable and her oppression natural. What gives the Testaments a YA feel is the school setting, where Agnes's circle of friends isn't so different from the typical teen drama sisterhood, ferociously devoted to one another inhabiting a world that on its surface couldn't be more different from the shadowy waking nightmares endured by handmaids. The brilliance of this framing is that it allows the show to make its horrors feel banal, which is more disturbing than making them feel exceptional. Daisy's function is to provide the outside perspective that Agnes has never had access to, a reader surrogate who can tell us, through her reactions, that the thing Agnes just accepted without blinking is, in fact, monstrous. The callousness of seeing a bunch of young women, perky and well-mannered, walking past hanging bodies without batting an eyelid feels somehow worse than how we were presented it in The Handmaid's Tale. The juxtaposition of grace and innocence with horror and nonchalance. And Lydia, the woman who helped build this machine, who participated in its worst years, who is now quietly trying to dismantle it from the inside, is the show's moral center precisely because she has no clean answer. She cannot be absolved. She cannot be simply condemned. She is the cost of complicity made flesh, doing the only thing she can still do, use what she built to tear it down. Based on Atwood's source novel and the narrative threads laid in the first 4 episodes, the season's second half will likely deliver Agnes's awakening, the discovery of her true identity as June's daughter, the exposure of Commander Judd and Paula's crimes via Lydia's files, and the decision to choose the aunt's path over marriage as a means of escape from Dr. Grove and the marital machinery closing in on her. Daisy's escalating danger. The Mayday operative network is compromised and Daisy's cover becomes increasingly fragile. Her relationship with Agnes will shift from tactical proximity to something genuinely transformative for both of them. The Great Escape, the novel's climax, centers on Agnes and Daisy working together to smuggle Lydia's files out of Gilead to Canada. A mission with sufficient documentation to expose the regime's crimes at an international level. The question the show will answer is how much of that climax it keeps and what the TV-specific alterations do to its emotional resonance. Lydia's reckoning. Does she survive? Does she escape? Does she die as the architect of what she's destroying? In the novel, she survives, and her account is presented as a historical document. What the show does with that ending, given how much it has already recontextualized her character, will define the season